Hey everyone, how's it going? It's your boy Skilled Fawn, and today we are going to be doing an Elden Ring challenge run. Let's waste no time and get straight into the rules. Starting off, I can only use Madness. This means weapons, incantations, seals, etc. are allowed. They must inflict the Madness status effect. Next is Armor, and this is allowed. Subsequently, Spirit Summons are allowed, but we will be doing something a little bit different. In my previous videos, I asked whether or not I should use them. Majority of you that commented wanted them, but one commenter mentioned that it should fit the challenge run, and I enjoyed the thought of that. In this run, we can only use Spirit Summons that inflict Madness. Subsequently, I must beat the game and DLC. I must defeat all Remembrance Bosses. Lastly, glitches and or exploits are allowed, so expect some cheeky and abnormal ways to get around areas and bosses. I'm really excited to share this run with everyone. I really enjoyed doing the Frenzied Flame ending in the main game, so it'll be interesting to see how Madness fares. Make sure to like, comment, and or subscribe if you haven't already. This helps to support me and push out the video to others who may be interested. Thank you for your continued support and motivating comments. Without further ado, let's get into the run. We spawn in and talk to Melina. This allows the player to get Torrent for easy map traversal. Next, we grab the Dectus medallion pieces. This will make getting into Altus slightly easier. Subsequently, we do a bunch of boss exploits. A lot of these cheeses are right next to each other in Caelid, so it makes things take a little less time. We do the Knights Cavalry, Commander O'Neill, and finally the Flying Dragon Grail cheese. Each of these are complicated in their own right, but Grail took me a really long time. Nonetheless, we take them all down and acquire some runes for leveling. This will be useful since we cannot wield any weapon until our faith level gets higher. Afterwards, we talk to Hayata and progress through her questline. Delivering Shabriri grapes, we eventually get to the point where we have to fight a few NPC invaders. Vike was the toughest since he has a lot of hard-hitting attacks when the player is low level. It also didn't help that I had very little madness resistance. With Vike down and a weapon that we can use in our possession, I figured it would be a good idea to start taking down some bosses. We enter Margit's fight to acquire some runes, but also to get another talisman slot. The weapon deals very low damage since we haven't upgraded it yet. Eventually though, we deal enough damage to take him out. Next we enter our first shardbearer and remembrance boss of the run, Godric the Grafted. Even though our damage is suboptimal, this boss is fairly easy, so you shouldn't have to worry too much. We blast him from afar using Frenzied Burst, then go in for close melee hits. After some time, we also take him down. Next up is General Radahn. He is one of the hardest shardbearers and bosses in the main game, which is quite the opposite of Godric. Radahn's hard-hitting attacks combined with a long reach of those attacks can be devastating for new or veteran players. To make things easier on us, I decided to do the Radahn cheese that makes him stop shooting arrows. This way he comes to us. After Godric, I did upgrade the weapon so we actually have some damage now, and we do take him out. As we head into Renala's domain, comment your predictions below. Do you think Madness will still be good late game and DLC, or will it start to fall off mid game? I'm curious to hear down below. Entering Renala's fight, we have to take down a few scholars with this glowing aura. This will break the shield around her and she will fall to the ground. This is the time to get some hits in. In phase 2, I like to run in for a jump attack to then go for a charge swing. She will then be really close to being staggered for a riposte. One thing that is becoming quite apparent early on is the variety of incants that inflict madness are insanely useful. Frenzied Burst is great for enemies and bosses that are mid to far range, and Flame of Frenzy is great for groups such as when she spawns the 4 wolves in. Needless to say, each of these has a useful aspect to them. With Renala down, we are one step closer to becoming the Lord of Frenzied Flame. We reconnect with Hayata and give her the final grape. This will send her below the capital, where we can eventually finish her questline. Next up is Goldfree. This fight is an introduction to a boss we will face much later on. Other than us getting a talisman slot after taking him down, there's nothing else to really note in this fight. Besides the Erdtree, we find Morgoth the Omen King. We fought him originally at Stormvale Castle before Godric. He was pretending to be Margit to protect the weakest shardbearer, and to also stop the Tarnish from coming closer to the Erdtree. The moveset is a lot different, but you may recognize similar attacks. In his second phase, Morgott uses Blood Flame attacks alongside some new moves to try and take the player down. Timing our dodges and attacking when openings are there, we take him down. Afterwards, we head into subterranean shunning grounds and get our one and only spirit summon. Subsequently, I wanted to take down Mohg the Omen to meet with the Three Fingers and progress Hiatus quests. Once we take down Mohg, we get Inescapable Frenzy and the Stone Fingerprint Shield. We also get the Frenzied Flame Seal, which is collected after accepting the Three Fingers and finishing Hiatus questline. If you haven't done this ending or questline before, I highly recommend completing it. The quest was fun and fairly simple. After accepting the Frenzied Flame and becoming its lord, we enter Farum Azula. We got here by using the rolled medallion and taking down Fire Giant in the mountaintops of the giants. This duo has a reputation for being extremely tough without using the sleep status effect. When we get Godskin Noble to about half health, it will go into its second phase, rolling around. I position myself and use the Flame of Frenzy, which has been really good so far in this run. After Noble, Apostle is short to follow, and we do take them down, so let's release Destined Death. Making our way towards Malekith, we snipe some birds along the pathway, making sure we aren't going to die. These birds are a pain at times. At the end of Farum Azula, we find Beast Clergyman, aka Malekith the Black Blade. Defending Destined Death, he attacks us ferociously. It isn't until phase 2 that we see his true form. Pulling out Destined Death to be his blade once more, he flings projectiles and even has some anime web attacks that annihilate the player if caught. I'm sorry Malekith, but madness trumps Destined Death today. The lands between must know death if madness is to be released. We take him down, releasing Destined Death. We have some fun messing around with NPCs and collecting some minor items I've been wanting, such as the gold fouled foot, to increase our rune acquisition on bosses' deaths, alongside some other useful items. Because we killed Malekith, this changes the capital into ash. The player will now have access to some new bosses to face off against. The first barrier to the Elden Throne is Sir Gideon Ofnir. The boss can be tough at times since he nearly one-shots player with his magic. Using madness to its fullest extent, we make this fool suffer. The Inescapable Frenzy is amazing because not many of the weapons the player has allows them to grapple another player or NPCs in combat. Eventually, the all-knowing goes mad. Next up is Godfrey, First Elden Lord. Now if you remember, we actually faced Godfrey before, or at least his Golden Shade version, which I referred to as Goldfrey. The main difference is that this version of Godfrey has 2 phases, while the Shade only has 1. In his second phase, Godfrey becomes a simple warrior, using his fists and legs to strike at us. The most difficult thing about this phase is the various grab attacks that he has. Luckily, we have some range attacks that will help us a bit, and be a little bit more cautious than normal. With blood, sweat, and tears, we take him out. Afterwards, we find Radagon and Elden Beast protecting the Erdtree. Thankfully, since we are using flame attacks, we deal some extra damage since they both have 0% fire resistance. These two are the final bosses of the main game, and so they have a reputation for being difficult. When we get to Elden Beast, things are slightly easier since the beast has many slow attacks that can be punished afterwards. Using the openings, we make sure to break its stance and get a riposte in. Eventually, we defeat them both. We become the Lord of Frenzied Flame, burning the Erdtree and setting madness throughout the lands between. This and Ronnie's ending have to be the best in the game. Next, we grab the Haligtree medallion pieces. As we enter consecrated snowfields, I want to fight the Mimic Tier and use the spirit summoned I acquired earlier. It was funny just to see the two of them fight and to hang back. After some time, I wanted to join in though, and so we use Inescapable Frenzy to inflict even more madness. Branching off of consecrated snowfields is Mohgwyn Palace and Miquella's Haligtree. I want to go fight Mohg first since I was curious how much damage I would inflict. Thankfully, the weapon I'm using deals physical damage because Mohg has 80% resistance to fire attacks. This fight might take longer than usual, but not by much. I'm happy this is not the Frenzy Flame perfume bottle only run because that was the biggest pain fighting Mohg. With Mohg defeated, we now have access to the DLC and get some nice runes. Next on our list is Malenia Blade of Miquella. She's arguably the hardest boss in the main game, and she is extremely agile and has deadly attacks that can shred the player in 1 or 2 shots. Making sure we take things cautiously, we strike when openings are available and try not to get too greedy. In her second phase, I want to try to do the unendurable cheese that I've done in the past. I would have liked to also cheese her first phase, but I would have needed to respec and basically redesign my character if I wanted to do that. If you haven't tried this yet, I highly recommend it. It is a tremendous amount of fun, but eventually we do take her down. Next up, we talk to Ronnie and begin her questline. This brings us underground where we find another mimic tier. Finding a few remembrance bosses below and above ground, we take them on. Fortisax is a really fun fight, and the music in this just goes so hard. An underrated boss fight in my opinion. Regal Ancestor in my runs is usually a joke, and the fight will end rather quickly. Next is Plassey and Estelle. I mentioned we started Ronnie's quest, and this is one of the end steps to finish her quest, alongside taking down another remembrance boss. Plassey is Elden Ring's souped up version of Medir from DS3, and so I always have some fun fighting him. After the boss gauntlet, we grab Melania's Great Rune to test something for the next boss. God-Devouring Serpent and Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, are relatively straightforward bosses in Elden Ring. The difficulty can come when the player doesn't use the weapon in his arena. Since we are using Madness only, a lot of our attacks will also deal fire damage, which he is also resistant to. Combine that with us needing to be right next to him in the lava to deal damage, I knew I needed to do something a lot different than my previous runs. So that's why I wanted to use Melania's Great Rune to restore the damage that I take. Unfortunately, I won't heal back all the health, but hopefully just enough. Once we get to Rykard himself, things get slightly more complicated, since there are a lot more attacks I need to watch out for. Eventually though, with our feet completely charred from the lava, we do take him down. With all the main game remembrance bosses defeated, it is a good time to transition towards the DLC. The first boss in the Lands of Shadow is Divine Beast Dancing Lion. This is an aggressive boss with a lot of movements that at times can feel unpredictable. In phase 2, the beast will switch between lightning, frost, and wind attacks. These enhance its current attacks, so we will have to be extra careful. After some time though, we manage to take it down. Afterwards, we head into Castle Anesis and go into Relana's fight. She has a reputation for being quite difficult with her dual swords. This boss is very similar to Pontiff Sullivan in Dark Souls 3, and you can even parry her just like Pontiff. That is the playstyle I like to use when fighting her, as this allows the player to get a lot of damage in, and even a charged R2 afterwards. As the fight goes on and she reaches her second phase, I like to stagger her out of her main combo. Eventually she will do this moon attack that can annihilate the player if caught off guard. With the last parry, we inflict enough damage to take her down, so let's continue into the DLC. We head into the Shadow Keep and hit this invisible wall to make our way towards Abyssal Woods. In Abyssal Woods, we find a couple bosses, but the most notable is Midra, Lord of Frenzied Flame. This has to be one of the coolest bosses From Software has made in my opinion. Using Frenzied Flame on the Lord of Frenzied Flame is not ideal, but we are able to get some decent damage in. Midra in phase 2 will rise up and then slam down, inflicting a ton of damage if caught. He also will have a bunch of enhanced attacks with Frenzied Flame littering the ground. We will also have to be extra careful not to get hit and thus go mad. Thankfully, with the music going hard, we take him down. Because we took down Midra, I want to go back and take down remembrance bosses that are located near the Shadow Keep. Here we find Shadow Avatar, Mesmer the Impaler, and Commander Gaius. With the Avatar, we get a ton of bonus damage in since it's weak to fire/frenzied flame. With Mesmer, the biggest thing is avoiding all of his area of effect attacks that spread flame across the ground. Mesmer has really grown on me each time I go through the DLC. Lastly, Commander Gaius can be a tricky boss, especially his charge attack. That hitbox is just something. We take all of these bosses on and have a relatively easy time going through their fights. I'm really happy to see a variety of bosses in the DLC, and each time I go through them, it's quite enjoyable. After some time though, we put these fools down. We say hello to Ancient Dragon Man, then go towards Baal the Dread. I'm quite bad at his fight, so we have some funny fails. There was even one time that I just had to bail out.
Time to abandon ship.
Eventually we got the run. The biggest issue I would have is that I would attack too early and keep getting punished by those attacks. I opted to go for a lot of charged R2s to hopefully keep stunning him and get the bonus damage on his head. Phase 2, Bale goes insane and has many cool but deadly attacks. Making sure we dodge accordingly and attack at opportune times, we take him down. Because we traversed the Shadow Realm quite a bit, it was a good time to head to the Finger Ruins and then towards Putrescent Night. These bosses have slightly less health than some of the bosses we have faced previously, but that doesn't mean it will be an easy time. Making sure we avoid each boss's major combos, we send them to the Erdtree's roots. We make our way into Rao Ruins and into Ramina's fight. I nicknamed her Malenia 2.0 because she's very agile and deals rot, and has some insane combos. Trick to her fight is making sure we don't get rotted, as this will make things a lot trickier. One good thing about fighting her with Madness and Frenzied Flame is that she is incredibly weak to fire related attacks, so we get some bonus damage in. Even though she may be tough, we also put her down. Going into Anir Elim, we find Needle Knight, Leda, and allies. I wanted to use the Spirit Summon I picked up previously, since this would be an opportune time to use him. Doing a similar tactic to Malenia's second phase, we absolutely shred Horde Set with Unendurable Frenzy, quickly annihilating him. Afterwards, Dryleaf Dane, Leda herself are quick to follow. Making our way to the top of Anir Elim, we find arguably the hardest boss in From Software games, which is Radahn, Consort of Miquella. This boss fight at times can feel like the most unfair thing ever, but I'm very happy that he isn't a pushover. That would have made the DLC not very satisfying in my opinion. We have a lot of fails and so many deaths, dear god. Eventually though, we get this run. At first I wanted to parry Radahn into oblivion, but then in phase 2 I was getting melted by his AoE attacks if I missed a single parry. I knew I needed to change things up, so I went with the Stone Fingerprint Shield. This will allow me to block Radahn's attacks, and even attack while he is mid-combo. I'm also using Malenia's Great Rune, and so hopefully I will get back enough health where I don't have to worry as much. One great thing about Vike's Spear is its long thrust attack, where it can actually hit Radahn from a fair distance away. I'm used to using a short spear when I join others to help them, so this was a nice change. Making sure we play things as safe as possible, we take Radahn down. With Radahn down, this has been Elden Ring completed with only Madness. In this run, we defeated all Remembrance bosses and completed the main game alongside the DLC. I hope you enjoyed the run and learned something new. Like, comment, and or subscribe to help support me and the channel. It has been awesome seeing everyone's comments and even some of you coming to the streams. It really means so much, and I am eternally grateful for all the support. I don't plan to stop making awesome and entertaining content for you guys. If you have any constructive criticism, let me know down below. Try to do something kind for someone today, whether it's a small or large gesture. This is your boy, Skilled Fawn, and I'm out.